Few people would deny that Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was a musical genius. If he'd lived in Timbuktu, say, he'd still have been a musical genius and still have produced fabulous music. But he wouldn't have written the Magic Flute if he'd lived on the edge of the Sahara Desert. Mozart's music is as much about time and place as it is about genius. Truly great works of art are not random accidents of creativity, lovely gifts parachuted down by God in an idle moment. Great works of art erupt like chemical reactions, brought to life by the collision of extraordinary events and exceptional people. "1791 was a year of immense upheaval and change. It was the second year of the French Revolution, the year that Thomas Paine published his radical Rights of Man, and the year the American Constitution and its Bill of Rights for all citizens was ratified by Congress and the first President of the United States, George Washington. William Wilberforce introduced his bill to end the Atlantic slave trade. William Blake was writing his mystical Songs of Experience, and James Boswell his Life of Johnson. But 1791 was also an incredible year in the history of music. In 1791, Mozart's life became shrouded in mystery and intrigue. The mythology surrounding Mozart is typified by his last meeting with Joseph Haydn in Vienna. Haydn had always championed Mozart, his former pupil, and the two men were good friends, often meeting here at the Esterhazy Keller. Before Haydn left Vienna for a tour of England, the two men dined together, and the young composer bade a poignant farewell with the words, "In all probability we are saying our last adieu in this life." Haydn, then aged 58, was naturally anxious about the long journey to London, and both of them thought he'd never make it back to Vienna in his lifetime. But in fact, it was Mozart, 25 years his junior, that died first. 1791 was the last year of his life. Incidents like his farewell to Haydn have fueled many myths about Mozart, in particular that he had a premonition of his own death. Because someone with such a massive talent died at the tragically young age of 35, the circumstances surrounding his death have been, perhaps understandably, romanticized. We seem not to be able to accept his loss simply as fate. The mythology of Mozart was brought to a worldwide audience by Peter Shaffer's play and film Amadeus. Excellent drama, dodgy history. Thanks largely to Amadeus, many people think Mozart ended up a wretched pauper, slung unceremoniously into a mass grave, forgotten and shunned, and plotted against by his deadly rival Salieri, who allegedly poisoned the young wunderkind. Most of the myths about Mozart's death can be traced to one single incident in 1791, the commissioning of his famous Requiem. The story goes a mysterious hooded stranger called upon Mozart late one night and asked him to write a mass for the dead, a requiem. The dark phantom never revealed his identity, nor whose death the mass was to commemorate. Mozart, terrified yet fascinated, accepted the commission. He then fell ill and died without finishing the work. His supposed last words were, "I was writing this for myself." In 1791, Mozart was writing at the top of his form. There's a sense of effortlessness about the Requiem as one soaring, heartbreaking melody follows another. Mozart had written sacred music throughout his life, but the Requiem has a depth and sincerity to it, a weight to it, that is at times quite chilling. Within weeks of Mozart's death, rumours had already begun to circulate that he'd been murdered. Unfortunately for conspiracy lovers, we can now say quite confidently that this was not the case. Because Mozart wasn't writing his Requiem for his own death, but for that of a 20-year-old woman who died of typhoid fever on St. Valentine's Day, 1791. Her name was Anna von Walsegg, and she's lying here beneath my feet in the church of Schottwien, 50 miles from Vienna. Her husband, Count Walsegg, wanted to glorify her memory with a Requiem Mass, and being short of neither cash nor taste, he wanted it to be written by Mozart. Now, Walsegg had long been in the habit of commissioning other composers and passing their work off as his. That's why there was so much secrecy surrounding the commissioning of the Requiem. He had intended to conduct the piece himself on the first anniversary of his wife's death. But another unexpected death foiled his plan, Mozart's, and the work remained unfinished. Mozart's myth-makers have never let the facts stand in the way of a good story. Maybe a lot of this doesn't really matter, but there's one aspect of Mozart's modern image that is desperately wrong and stands in the way of a proper appreciation of his great genius. And that's the idea that he was some sort of giggling cretin, inexplicably blessed with some awesome God-given talent. The brain of Einstein, you might say, trapped in the body of Norman wisdom. It's true that when you read Mozart's letters, he comes across as an intensely playful character, indulging one moment in zany riddles and codes, the next in a sort of Benny Hill-style slap and tickle. But the vast majority of his letters concern themselves with technical musical matters, with arts, books, science and politics. Here was a highly educated, articulate and religious man, fluent in 5 languages, who held strong and passionate opinions about the great issues of his time. It goes without saying that Mozart is a crucial figure in musical history, but I believe he responded more profoundly, more brilliantly than anyone else in whatever field to the spirit of his age. To understand Mozart's work, we need to see it as an essential contribution to the great intellectual project of the 18th century, the Enlightenment.